So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the basics of the reanimated library. So this is a React Native library that re-implements the animated library. So that animated library is something React Native created, and it's to help with creating animations. And so one of the big things that this does is it makes this library declarative. And one of the big differences I found when I gave it a try was the performance was huge. It was way better. At least in Android, I noticed a huge bump. So we're going to be taking a look at how you can use this, and specifically the use case we're going to be looking at is dragging items across the screen. Now with this library, another one that you use in conjunction is the gesture handler. So this is a library that's going to handle basically getting the events. So instead of the pan responder, you can use this. And so in conjunction, we can use this to listen for events and this to, I guess, animate things, and they work very nicely together. So we're going to be taking a look at an example of one of these repos. So if you go to reanimated and then example code, we're going to be doing this example here. So I copied this code and I put in my editor, and we're going to be starting from there. I'll also put this link below if you want to copy it. So what I have here is I'm using Expo init, and if we come over here, Expo init, and then I went ahead and did a basic blank template, and I just pasted the code into app.js. And then I need to restart my, I did yarn start here, and then, or npm start you can do, to start up the server, and then I pushed I to open this up in an iOS emulator. And so that's what I have running right here. You can also press A if you want Android. And note, if you're using non-Expo, you're going to have to link the code for this. But with Expo, this is actually built in. You don't even need to install any other libraries. You can just directly paste this into the template. All right, so when you get that all loaded up, what you should see is a ball here or circle, and you can drag it around the screen. So you can see it's pretty smooth. And then when we drop it, we can see the coordinates at which it was dropped. So we're going to go through this example code first and kind of talk through how this is all working. So what I want to start with is the render function and this particular bit right here. So what you'll notice is that there is a circle being displayed here. And so that is this animated view right here. So whatever we want to drag in this case, we are putting it inside of an animated view. So I want to drag the circle. So this animated view is that circle. I'm not sure why they called it a box here, even though they made this a circle, but you can see these are the styles making it a circle. Now note, you can put anything you want inside of this. They didn't have any children, but what we can do here is we can, for example, put some text inside, say hello, and let's go ahead and import that from React Native. And it crashed. So if your Expo is crashing like mine is, if you go into terminal and you just push R, that restarts the Metro bundler. And then you hit command and then R, and that'll restart it over here. All right, so you can see my hellos inside of that, and now that's being dragged with everything. So basically whatever you want to interact with, you use an animated view, then you put stuff inside of it. And again, if I want to, I can comment out the styles for the box, and now I just have hello, and I can drag hello around. And then what you do is you wrap a pan gesture handler around it. And so now you can interact with it. And I'm not really sure what this max pointers does. I just kept the default one when I was using it. I was building a drag and drop list, and so I only needed one thing to drag, and I don't know if it had to do with the number of fingers you're using, but I just kept it at 1. And then basically this handler will spit out events. So let's just console log this to see what this value is. So we're going to say console.log e, and then we can just move around hello. You'll notice it's not moving anymore because I got rid of the value there, but you can see this is the information we have access to. Notice the native event here. So we have a whole bunch of data points that's giving us information about what's happening with that gesture. So this is the data that you have access to. And so you can then use this to respond accordingly. So maybe you want to do something with these data points. So in this case, what it is doing is it's passing it to this thing called this.onGesture event. So what the gesture event does, if we come on up here, is you're basically mapping information. So basically what it's saying here is it's using this event, and then we have an array, and then we have an object here. What you want to see is this native event matches this native event here. And then basically what it's saying is it would like to get the translation X value, the translation Y value, and then also the state. And it's mapping those three values to these three variables. So now we are storing in drag X, drag Y, and gesture state these three values. And so what we can do is once we store these values in here, we can then use these values in our application to represent, for example, where it is on the screen. And that's basically what's happening. So that is the very simple version of how this example code is working with Reanimated. Is we're listening for events with the pan gesture handler, and then we were passing in an event listener, kind of this on gesture event, and then we're telling it which things we care about. We're storing them in a variable, and then we can take these variables and we can use them down here, and we can pass them to the styles. For example, this animated view. So here what they're doing is they're transforming, and they're using translate X to do this and translate Y. And if we look at this translate X, we can see that there's some other stuff that's going on here. So for example, they're adding some information onto this. So you'll notice the syntax may look a little weird. There's a conditional, then there's an equals, and then there's a set. The reason why this is all happening here is why didn't they just do like an if statement, right? If, and then assignment or something like that. This is all being run on the UI thread. So what that means is you can kind of think of it like two things. There's the JS thread and the UI thread. So the JS stuff is where React Native code is run, and then the UI thread is where it gets displayed. So if we're sending data back and forth between the JS thread and the UI thread, that's where things can get slow. So this is all being run on the UI thread. So that's why it's faster. And so that's why the syntax looks a bit odd here. But basically all that's happening is this is an equal sign. So it's saying if we are currently active or actively in the gesture, then we are going to do the this.addX. Otherwise, we're going to set the value here. So this is an if-else statement. So you can see if we hover if-else node. And really this is, I would say, we could simplify this a lot. When I was using this, I didn't actually end up using translations. You can see it actually has a really pretty smooth drag. But I actually found that I had problems getting it to work, so I just simplified this a lot. So one of the first things that I did is when I was doing drag and dropping, I didn't care about the X direction. So what you can do is you can just remove this if you don't need it. So I got rid of trans X, and I got rid of it here. So now what's going to happen is only the Y value is going to be translated. So you'll notice that, for example, I can't, even though I'm moving it here. I'm going to get rid of this alert, by the way. This is annoying me. I'm going to comment it out, and we're going to get back to how that alert's even happening in a second. But yeah, so now you can see only the Y-axis is working. And then what I did is I said instead of caring about the translate Y value, I cared about this absolute Y value. So what I can do is I can say create a new value up here. Absolute Y, and you could call this whatever you want. I'm just gonna give it the same name. And you notice we're using this value. This is something from Animated, so this is a little bit different than just regular integer. And I'm just gonna say absolute Y is equal to this to absolute Y. And then I don't need any kind of addition, and I'm not doing any conditions. So note there's a whole bunch of different operators that you can do on, and you can look at the docs for that. So here you can say set, call, debug, etc. So all these are the different operators you may want to use to affect what the value is. In my case, I just directly want the value absolute Y. But what you could do is you could add, subtract, etc. from the value if you need to. And that's what some of this stuff is doing down here. But for example, if I want to comment this out and just keep this very simple, we can't. So let's just start with that. So here I'm going to say absolute y, store that value here. And then what I'm going to do is in my box right here, I'm going to say, get rid of this. I'm going to say the top is equal to this dot absolute y. And oh, I messed something up. So I have my absolute y here. And I think maybe I commented out a value that's being used. Yeah, right here. I'm going to comment out the animated code. By the way, in VS Code, if you hover and then hit Command/ or Control/, that's how I'm commenting everything out really fast. All right, so here's hello up. It's kind of hidden up there at the top. One thing that you can do is you can see we can set the default value. So I'm going to set that to like 100. And that'll bring it down. All right, now I can move it like this. You'll notice there's not much of a visual change that I saw, and I thought this was a little bit simpler than the translations, so I went with this approach when I was using Reanimated. But you can see this is how you can drag things around using Reanimated. And now I have the value that I caught, or like you start dragging from. I'm also moving that value, but there's no reason why you can't use this value in other things. So what do I mean by that? Well, I could animate, for example, a box over here. So animated dot view. Actually, we'll just do it like this. And we can do, and I guess instead of box, this is just a circle. But you'll notice like, oh, I need to do an array there, and then I'm going to say top is equal to absolute y. And so now we can see that the y value is going to follow this around. So I start the gesture with hello, and now it's going to be following it. And now what we can do is this is where we can add, for example, maybe a value to the y. So here I can say circle y is equal to 100, and then maybe I'm going to add something to that. So I'm going to say circle y, and I'm going to get rid of this actually. So I'm going to say circle y is equal to absolute y, and I'd like to add 100. So I'm going to say new value 100. I'm actually not sure if I can just put a new value there like that. And we're going to move this, and that definitely did not work. Oh, actually we just didn't use it down here. So I'm expecting now that the circle should no longer be on top of this. Oh, it just crashed. So I'm going to hit R in my terminal. And so now the circle is below hello by 100. All right, so we're just basically computing this circle y value based on the absolute y, and then we're adding 100 to it. So now it's kind of following my hello. But you notice I can't start dragging the circle, right? Because I don't have a pan gesture handler around this. So it's just like that. So there you go. You can do all kinds of stuff that you are moving around and dragging. The other thing is like maybe I don't want this circle to show up unless we're actually dragging. So that's where we can start interacting with this element called animated.code. So here what we can do is we can do different things on different conditions. So if we get rid of the thing right there, and we can just say state dot and hit control space, we can see the different states that are available to us. So we can basically have a function be called whenever the animation is active, whether it just began, it was canceled, and failed, undetermined. We can do things on these states. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when the animation starts, I want it to call this function. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call it start. All right, and I'm going to call this start here. And what you can do is, here is how you can tell it what values you want to pass in. So this is it passing in add x and add y. I'm not going to pass in any values right now, so it's going to be an empty array there. All I'm going to do is I'm going to say this dot state. I'm going to say dragging is true. And so here I'm going to have an initial value for my state. it's going to be false. So maybe I only show this circle when it's dragging. Alright, so we don't see it, and then once I click on hello and start dragging, you'll notice the hello or the circle pops up there. And you'll notice when I stop dragging, I still see the circle there, so maybe I want to listen for an on end. So I'm going to copy this, paste this here, and I'm going to say canceled. So here I'm going to say this dot done. And here I'm going to say false and set the state. And by the way, so there's a couple different events that could happen. It could fail, or it could cancel, or it could end. Let's do the end event for now. So I'm going to click, drag. Oh, and I messed up something. This dot, oh, I didn't say done here. So I can click, I see my circle, and then I let go and it disappears. Now, we can use all these different operators to combine things. So for example, let's say we want to use the OR operator. And the reason why I may want to do that is I want to may say here OR and I'm going to say the gesture state is equal to end, or the gesture state was canceled, or it failed. So basically, somehow my animation is done. I'm going to then say dragging is false. So one of these conditions is true, then we're going to call this function. All right, so we drag around, and then we let go, and it's gone. And so this is very helpful because now I can get events, and I can know what the value is of the Y position as well when this is happening. And so this was helpful for me when I was making a drag and drop list, because what I could listen for was the move event, or when it was active. So let's do one more of these, and I can say state.active. And then what I can do is I'm going to say this dot moving. And I want to know what the value of that absolute Y value is. All right, so I can do that here. And I'm going to say this dot set state is equal to Y. So now I'm going to show the Y value in my state. So Y is going to be equal to 0. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to make this a safe area. Dang it, it's not giving me auto completion. I think it's called a safe. Yep, safe area view. Because I'm using an iPhone and this bump is going to mess things up. And now I want to display what the Y value is. So I'm just at the top here going to say Y is equal to this dot state dot Y. All right, so I can see the Y value is at 0. Then when I click on this and we start moving, you can see the Y value as it changes, right? And we're updating the state. I'm actually not really sure why that circle started appearing right next to hello again. Did I change some? I think maybe when I did this safe area view that changed the circle. I'm going to increase this to 200 and see if the circle is now, yep, circle's now down there. I think the position of it is getting a little messed up because of that safe area view for some reason. But this is very helpful to be able to listen for the active event. So whenever the gesture is being moved around, I can get that updated Y position. And if I wanted to know what the circle position was, I could get that as well by passing in this dot circle Y. And so this is going to be Y, and this is going to be circle Y. So I have both the Y positions there, and I can do whatever I want with this. And so what you can do is you can then update the state or do whatever you want based on what these Y values are. And so in my case, when I was building a drag and drop list, what I could do was when the position of this got to a certain place, I could reorder the list. But I'm going to talk more about that in a future video. This is just to give you a taste of Reanimated And that's all for this video. I hope that helped get your mind around it a little bit, because it's kind of a weird syntax to get started with. And note, dragging is only one of the use cases of this library. There's a ton of them. Highly recommend going and checking out just the entire example repository and giving some of these a try.